Your mother. Soap! The forest will eat love! Straight ahead! Stupid and a stupid cow! The voice boomed out so suddenly that Decimus Scotti jumped. He stared off into the dim jungle glade from which he only heard animal and insect calls and the low whistling of wind moments before. It was a queer, oddly accented voice of indiscriminate gender, tremulous in its modulations but unmistakably human, or at very least elven, an isolated Bosmer perhaps with a poor grasp of the Cyrodiilic language. After countless hours of plodding through the dense knot of Valenwood jungle, any voice of slight familiarity sounded wondrous. "Hello," he cried. "Beetles on any names?" "Certainly yesterday, yes," the voice called back. "Who, what, and when, and mice?" "I'm afraid I don't understand," replied Scotti, turning toward the brambled tree, thick as a wagon, where the voice had issued. "But you needn't be afraid of me. My name is Decimus Scotti. I'm a Cyrodiil from the Imperial City. I came here to help rebuild Valenwood after the war, you see, and now I'm rather lost. Gemstones and grilled slaves. The war," moaned the voice, and broke down into sobs. "You know about the war? I wasn't sure. I wasn't even sure how far away from the border I am now." Scotti began slowly walking toward the tree. He dropped Reglius's satchel to the ground and held out his empty hands. "I'm unarmed. I only want to know the way to the closest town. I'm trying to meet my friend Leodis Jurus in Silvenar." "Silvenar!" The voice laughed. It laughed even louder as Scotti circled the tree. "Worms and wine, worms and wine. Silvenar sings for worms and wine." There was nothing to be found anywhere around the tree. "I don't see you. Why are you hiding?" In frustration born of hunger and exhaustion, he struck the tree trunk. A sudden shiver of gold and red erupted from a hollow nook above, and Scotti was surrounded by 6 winged creatures, scarcely more than a few inches long. Bright crimson eyes were set on either side of tunnel-like protuberances, the animals' always open mouths. They were legless, and their thin, rapidly beating aureate wings seemed poorly constructed to transport their fat, swollen bellies. And yet they darted through the air like sparks from a fire. Whirling about the poor clerk, they began chattering what he now understood to be perfect nonsense. Wines and worms, how far from the border am I? Academic garnishments, and alas, Leodis Jurus. Hello, I'm afraid I'm unarmed. Smoke and flames, and the closest town is dear oblivion. Swollen on bad meat, an indigo nimbus, but you needn't be afraid of me. Why are you hiding? Why are you hiding? Before I begin to friend, love me, Lady Zuleika. Furious with the mimics, Scotti swung his arms, driving them up into the treetops. He stomped back to the clearing and opened up the satchel again, as he had done some hours before. There was still, unsurprisingly, nothing useful in the bag, and nothing to eat in any corner or pocket. A goodly amount of gold, he smiled grimly as he had done before at the irony of being financially solvent in the jungle. A stack of neat blank contracts from Lord Van Eyck's building commission, some thin cord, and an oiled leather cloak for bad weather. At least, Scotti considered, he had not suffered rain. A rolling moan of thunder reminded Scotti of what he had suspected for some weeks now. He was cursed. Within an hour's time, he was wearing the cloak and clawing his way through mud. The trees, which had earlier allowed no sunlight in, provided no shelter against the pounding storm and wind. The only sounds that pierced the pelting of the rain were the mocking calls of the flying creatures, flitting just above, babbling their nonsense. Scotti bellowed at them, threw rocks, but they seemed enamoured of his company. While he was reaching to grab a promising-looking stone to hurl at his tormentors, Scotti felt something shift beneath his feet. Wet but solid ground suddenly liquefied and became a rolling tide, rushing him forward. Light as a leaf, he flew head over feet overhead until the mudflow dropped and he continued forward, plunging down into a river 25 feet below. The storm passed quite as instantly as it had arrived. The sun melted the dark clouds and warmed Scotty as he swam for the shore. There, another sign of the Khajiiti incursion into Valenwood greeted him. A small fishing village had stood there once, so recently extinct that it smouldered like a still-warm corpse. Dirt cairns that had once housed fish by the smell of them had been ravaged, their bounty turned to ash. Rafts and skiffs lay broken, scuttled, half-submerged. All the villagers were no more, either dead or refugees far away, or so he presumed. Something banged against the wall of one of the ruins. Scotty ran to investigate. "My name is Decumus Scotty," sang the first winged beast. "I'm a Cyrodiil from the Imperial City. I came here to help rebuild Valenwood after the war, you see, and now I'm rather lost." "I swell to maculate, Apenek," agreed one of its companions. "I don't see you. Why are you hiding?" As they fell into chattering, Scotty began to search the rest of the village. Surely the cats had left something behind, a scrap of dried meat, a morsel of fish sausage, anything. But they had been immaculate in their complete annihilation. There was nothing to eat anywhere. Scotty did find one item of possible use under the tumbled remains of a stone hut, a bow and 2 arrows made of bone. The string had been lost, likely burned away in the heat of the fire, but he pulled the cord from Reglius's satchel and restrung it. The creatures flew over and hovered nearby as he worked. "The convent of the sacred Leodes Eurus? You know about the war. Worms and wine circumscribe a golden host, Apenek." The moment the cord was taut, Scotty knocked an arrow and swung around, pulling the string tight against his chest. The winged beasts, having had experience with archers before, shot off in all directions in a blur. They needn't have bothered. Scotty's first arrow dove into the ground 3 feet in front of him. He swore and retrieved it. The mimics, having likewise had experience with poor archers before, returned at once to hovering nearby and mocking Scotty. On his second shot, Scotty did much better, in purely technical terms. He remembered how the archers in Falinesti looked when he pulled himself out from under the Horva tick, and they were all taking aim at him. He extended his left hand, and right elbow in a symmetrical line, drawing the bow so his hand touched his jawline, and he could see the creature in his sight like the arrow was a finger he was pointing with. The bolt missed the target by only 2 feet, but it continued on its trajectory, snapping when it struck a rock wall. Scotty walked to the river's edge. He had only 1 arrow left, and perhaps he considered it would be most practical to find a slow-moving fish and fire it on that. If he missed, at least there was less of a chance of breaking the shaft, and he could always retrieve it from the water. A rather torpid, whiskered fish rolled by, and he took aim at it. "My name is Decumus Scotty," one of the creatures howled, frightening the fish away. "Stupid and a stupid cow, will you dance a dance in fire?" Scotty turned and aimed the arrow as he had done before. This time, however, he remembered to plant his feet as the archers had done, 7 inches apart, knees straight, left leg slightly forward to meet the angle of his right shoulder. He released the last arrow. The arrow also proved a serviceable prong for roasting the creature against the smoking hot stones of one of the ruins. Its other companions had disappeared instantly after the beast was slain, and Scotty was able to dine in peace. The meat proved to be delicious, if scarcely more than a first course. He was picking the last of it from the bones when a boat sailed into view from around the bend of the river. At the helm were Bosmer sailors. Scotty ran to the bank and waved his arms. They averted their eyes and continued past. "You bloody callous bastards," Scotty howled. "Knaves, hooligans, apenecks, scoundrels!" A grey-whiskered form came out from a hatch, and Scotty immediately recognized him as Griff Mallon, the poet-translator he had met in the caravan from Cyrodiil. He peered Scotty's direction, and his eyes lit up with delight. Decumus Scotty. Precisely the man I hoped to see. I want to get your thoughts on a rather puzzling passage in the Menoriad play bar. It begins, I went weeping into the world, searching for wonders. Perhaps you're familiar with it? I'd like nothing better than to discuss the Menoriad play bar with you, Griff, Scotty called back. Would you let me come aboard, though, first? Overjoyed at being on a ship bound for any port at all, Scotty was true to his word. For over an hour, as the boat rolled down the river past the blackened remnants of Bosmeri villages, he asked no questions and spoke nothing of his life over the past weeks. He merely listened to Mallan's theories of Merethic Aldmeri Esoterica. The translator was undemanding of his guest's scholarship, accepting nods and shrugs as civilized conversation. He even produced some wine and fish jelly, which he shared with Scotty absent-mindedly as he expounded on his various theses. Finally, while Mallan was searching for a reference to some minor point in his notes, Scotty asked, rather off subject, but I was wondering where we're bound. The very heart of the province, Silvanar, Mallan said, not looking up from the passage he was reading. It's somewhat bothersome, actually, as I wanted to go to Woodhearth first to talk to a Bosmer there who claims to have an original copy of Dirith Yalmilhiad, if you can believe it. But for the time being, that has to wait. Somerset Isle has surrounded the city and is in the process of starving the citizenry until they surrender. It's a tiresome prospect, since the Bosmeri are happy to eat one another, so there's a risk that at the end only one fat wood elf will remain to wave the flag. That is vexing, agreed Scotty sympathetically. To the east, the Khajiiti are burning everything, and to the west, the High Elves are waging war. I don't suppose the borders to the north are clear. They're even worse, replied Mallan, finger on the page, still distracted. The Cyrodiils and Redguards don't want Bosmer refugees streaming into their provinces. It only stands to reason. Imagine how much more criminally inclined they'd be now that they're homeless and hungry. So, murmured Scotty, feeling a shiver, we're trapped in Valenwood. Not at all. I need to leave fairly shortly myself, as my publisher has set a very definite deadline for my new book of translations. From what I understand, one merely petitions to the Silvanar for special border protection, and one can cross into Cyrodiil with impunity. Petition the Silvanar, or petition at Silvanar? Petition the Silvanar at Silvanar. It's an odd nomenclature that is typical of this place, the sort of thing that makes my job as a translator that much more challenging. The Silvanar, he, or rather they, are the closest the Bosmeri have to a great leader. The essential thing to remember about the Silvanar, Mallan smiled, finding the passage he was looking for. Here, a fortnight, inexplicable, the world burns into a dance. There's that metaphor again. What were you saying about the Silvanar? Asked Scotty. The essential thing to remember. I don't remember what I was saying, replied Mallan, turning back to his oration. In a week's time, the little boat bumped along the shallow, calmer waters of the foaming current the Xylo had become, and Decumus Scotty first saw the city of Silvanar. If Falinesti was a tree, then Silvanar was a flower. A magnificent pile of faded shades of green, red, blue, and white, shining with crystalline residue. Mallan had mentioned offhand, when not otherwise explaining Aldmeri prosody, that Silvanar had once been a blossoming glade in the forest, but owing to some spell or natural cause, the tree's sap began flowing with translucent liqueur. The process of the sap flowing and hardening over the colourful trees had formed the web of the city. Mallan's description was intriguing, but it hardly prepared him for the city's beauty. "What is the finest, most luxurious tavern here?" Scotty asked one of the Bosmer boatmen. "Prithala Hall," Mallan answered. "But why don't you stay with me? I'm visiting an acquaintance of mine, a scholar I think you'll find fascinating. His hovel isn't much, but he has the most extraordinary ideas about the principles of a Merethic Aldmeri tribe, the Sarmathi." "Under any other circumstances I would happily accept," said Scotty graciously, "but after weeks of sleeping on the ground or on a raft and eating whatever I could scrounge, I feel the need for some indulgent creature comforts, and then, after a day or two, I'll petition the Silvanar for safe passage to Cyrodiil." The men bade each other goodbye. Griff Mallan gave him the address of his publisher in the Imperial City, which Scotty accepted and quickly forgot. The clerk wandered the streets of Silvenar, crossing bridges of amber, admiring the petrified forest architecture. In front of a particularly estimable palace of silvery reflective crystal, he found Prithala Hall. He took the finest room and ordered a gluttonous meal of the finest quality. At a nearby table he saw two very fat fellows, a man and a Bosmer, remarking how much finer the food was there than at the Silvenar's palace. They began to discuss the war and some issues of finances and rebuilding provincial bridges. The man noticed Scotty looking at them, and his eyes flashed recognition. "Scotty, is that you? Kinnereth, where have you been? I've had to make all the contacts here on my own." At the sound of his voice, Scotty recognized him. The fat man was Leodis Juras, vastly engorged. Decumus Scotty sat down, listening to Leodis Juras. The clerk could hardly believe how fat his former colleague at Lord Atreus's building commission had become. The piquant aroma of the roasted meat dish before Scotty melted away. All the other sounds and textures of Prithala Hall vanished all around him, as if nothing else existed but the vast form of Juras. Scotty did not consider himself an emotional man, but he felt a tide flow over him at the sight and sound of the man whose badly written letters had been the guideposts that carried him from the imperial city back in early frost fall. "Where have you been?" Juras demanded again. "I told you to meet me in Falinesti weeks ago." "I was there weeks ago," Scotty stammered, too surprised to be indignant. "I got your note to meet you in Athe, and so I went there, but the Khajiit had burned it to the ground. Somehow I found my way with the refugees in another village, and someone there told me that you had been killed." "And you believed that right away?" Juras sneered. "The fellow seemed very well informed about you. He was a clerk from Lord Vanek's building commission named Reglius, and he said that you had also suggested that he come down to Valenwood to profit from the war." "Oh, yes," said Juras, after thinking a moment. "I recall the name now. Well, it's good for business to have two representatives from Imperial building commissions here. We just need to all coordinate our bids, and all should be well." "Reglius is dead," said Scotty, "but I have his contracts from Lord Vanek's commission." "Even better," gasped Juras, impressed. "I never knew you were such a ruthless competitor, Decumus Scotty. Yes, this could certainly improve our position with the Silvenar. Have I introduced you to Basth here?" Scotty had only been dimly aware of the Bosmer's presence at the table with Juras, which was surprising given that the Mer's girth nearly equalled his dining companion. The clerk nodded to Basth coldly, still numb and confused. It had not left his mind that only any hour earlier Scotty had intended to petition the Silvenar for safe passage through the border back to Cyrodiil. The thought of doing business with Juras, after all, of profiting from Valenwood war with Elsewhere, and now the second one with the Somerset Isle, seemed like something happening to another person. "Your colleague and I were talking about the Silvenar," said Basth, putting down the leg of mutton he had been gnawing on. "I don't suppose you've heard about his nature." "A little, but nothing very specific. I got the impression that he's very important and very peculiar." "He's the representative of the people, legally, physically, and emotionally," explained Juras, a little annoyed at his new partner's lack of common knowledge. "When they're healthy, so is he. When they're mostly female, so is he. When they cry for food or trade or an absence of foreign interference, he feels it too and makes laws accordingly. In a way he's a despot, but he's the people's despot." "That sounds," said Scotty, searching for the appropriate word, "like bunk." "Perhaps it is," shrugged Basth, "but he has many rights as the voice of the people, including the granting of foreign building and trade contracts. It's not important whether you believe us. Just think of the Silvenar as being like one of your mad emperors, like Pelagius. The problem facing us now is that since Valenwood is being attacked on all sides, the Silvenar's aspect is now one of distrust and fear of foreigners. The one hope of his people, and thus of the Silvenar himself, is that the Emperor will intervene and stop the war." "Will he?" asked Scotty. You know as well as we do that the Emperor has not been himself lately. Eurus helped himself to Reglius's satchel and pulled out the blank contracts. Who knows what he'll choose to do or not do? That reality is not our concern, but these blessings from the late good Sir Reglius make our job much simpler. They discussed how they would represent themselves to the Sylvanar into the evening. Scotty ate continuously, but not nearly so much as Eurus and Basth. When the sun had begun to rise in the hills, its light reddening through the crystal walls of the tavern, Eurus and Basth left to their rooms at the palace, granted to them diplomatically in lieu of an actual immediate audience with the Sylvanar. Scotty went to his room. He thought about staying up a little longer to ruminate over Eurus's plans and see what might be the flaw in them, but upon touching the cool, soft bed, he immediately fell asleep. The next afternoon, Scotty awoke, feeling himself again. In other words, timid. For several weeks now, he had been a creature bent on mere survival. He had been driven to exhaustion, attacked by several jungle beasts, starved, nearly drowned, and forced into discussions of ancient Aldmeri poetical works. The discussion he had with Eurus and Basth about how to dupe the Sylvanar into signing their contracts seemed perfectly reasonable then. Scotty dressed himself in his old battered clothes and went downstairs in search of food and a peaceful place to think. "You're up!" cried Basth upon seeing him. "We should go to the palace now." "Now?" whined Scotty. "Look at me! I need new clothes. This isn't the way one should dress to pay a call on a prostitute, let alone the voice of the people of Valenwood. I haven't even bathed." "You must cease from this moment forward being a clerk and become a student of mercantile trade," said Leodis Eurus grandly, taking Scotty by the arm and leading him into the sunlit boulevard outside. "The first rule is to recognize what you represent to the prospective client and what angle best suits you. You cannot dazzle him with opulent fashion and professional bearing, my dear boy, and it would be fatal if you attempted to. Trust me on this. Several others besides Basth and I are guests at the palace, and they have made the error of appearing too eager, too formal, too ready for business. They will never be granted audience with the Sylvanar, but we have remained aloof ever since the initial rejection. I've dallied about the court, spread my knowledge of life in the imperial city, had my ears pierced, attended promenades, eaten and drunk of all that was given to me. I dare say I've put on a pound or two. The message we've sent is clear. It is in his, not our, best interest to meet." "Our plan worked," added Basth. "When I told his minister that our imperial representative had arrived, and that we were at last willing to meet with the Sylvanar this morning, we were told to bring you there straight away." "Aren't we late, then?" asked Scotty. "Very," laughed Eurus. "But that's again part of the angle we're representing, benevolent disinterest. Remember not to confuse the Sylvanar with conventional nobility. His is the mind of the common people. When you grasp that, you'll understand how to manipulate him." Eurus spent the last several minutes of the walk through the city expounding on his theories about what Valenwood needed, how much, and at what price. They were staggering figures, far more construction and far higher costs than anything Scotty had been used to dealing with. He listened carefully. All around them, the city of Sylvanar revealed itself, glass and flower, roaring winds and beautiful inertia. When they reached the palace of the Sylvanar, Decimus Scotty stopped, stunned. Eurus looked at him for a moment and then laughed. "It's quite bizarre, isn't it?" That it was. A frozen scarlet burst of twisted, uneven spires, as if a rival sun rising. A blossom the size of a village, where courtiers and servants resembled nothing so much as insects, walked about it, sucking its ichor. Entering over a bent petal-like bridge, the three walked through the palace of unbalanced walls. Where the partitions bent close together and touched, there was a shaded hall or a small chamber. Where they warped away from one another, there was a courtyard. There were no doors anywhere, no any way to get to the Sylvanar, but by crossing through the entire spiral of the palace, through meetings and bedrooms and dining halls, past dignitaries, consorts, musicians, and many guards. "It's an interesting place," said Basth, "but not very much privacy. Of course, that suits the Sylvanar well." When they reached the inner corridors, 2 hours after they first entered the palace, guards, brandishing blades and bows, stopped them. "We have an audience with the Sylvanar," said Juras patiently. "This is Lord Decimus Scotti, the imperial representative." One of the guards disappeared down the winding corridor and returned moments later with a tall, proud Bosmer, clad in a loose robe of patchwork leather. He was the Minister of Trade. "The Sylvanar wishes to speak with Lord Decimus Scotti alone." It was not the place to argue or show fear, so Scotti stepped forward, not even looking toward Juras and Bast. He was certain they were showing their masks of benevolent indifference. Following the minister into the audience chamber, Scotti recited to himself all the facts and figures Juras had presented to him. He willed himself to remember the angle and the image he must project. The audience chamber of the Sylvanar was an enormous dome where the walls bent from bowl-shaped at the base inward to almost meet at the top. A thin ray of sunlight streamed through the fissure hundreds of feet above and directly upon the Sylvanar, who stood upon a puff of shimmering grey powder. For all the wonder of the city and the palace, the Sylvanar himself looked perfectly ordinary. An average, blandly handsome, slightly tired-looking, extraordinary wood-elf of the type one might see in any capital in the Empire. It was only when he stepped from the dais that Scotti noticed an eccentricity in his appearance. He was very short. "I had to speak with you alone," said the Sylvanar in a voice common and unrefined. "May I see your papers?" Scotti handed him the blank contracts from Lord Vanek's building commission. The Sylvanar studied them, running his finger over the embossed seal of the Emperor before handing them back. He suddenly seemed shy, looking to the floor. "There are many charlatans at my court who wish to benefit from the wars. I thought you and your colleagues were among them, but those contracts are genuine." "Yes, they are," said Scotti, calmly. The Sylvanar's conventional aspect made it easy for Scotti to speak, with no formal greetings, no deference, exactly as Juras had instructed. "It seems most sensible to begin straight away talking about the roads which need to be rebuilt, and then the harbours that the Altmeri have destroyed. And then I can give you my estimates on the cost of resupplying and renovating the trade routes." "Why hasn't the Emperor seen fit to send a representative when the war with Elsewhere began 2 years ago?" asked the Sylvanar glumly. Scotti thought a moment before replying of all the common Bosmeri he had met in Valenwood. The greedy, frightened mercenaries who had escorted him from the border, the hard-drinking revellers and expert pest-exterminating archers in the western cross of Falinesti, nosy old Mother Pascost in Havel's slump, Captain Balfix, the poor, sadly reformed pirate, the terrified but hopeful refugees of Athe and Grenos, the mad, murderous, self-devouring wild hunt of Vindisi, the silent dour boatman hired by Griff Mallon, the degenerate, grasping Bast. If one creature represented their total disposition, and that of many more throughout the province, what would be his personality? Scotti was a clerk by occupation and nature, instinctively comfortable cataloguing and filing, making things fit in a system. If the soul of Valenwood were to be filed, where would it be put? The answer came upon him almost before he posed himself the question. Denial. "I'm afraid that question doesn't interest me," said Scotti. "Now can we get back to the business at hand?" All afternoon, Scotti and the Sylvanar discussed the pressing needs of Valenwood. Every contract was filled and signed. So much was required, and there were so many costs associated that addendums and codicils had to be scribbled into the margins of the papers, and those had to be resigned. Scotti maintained his benevolent indifference, but he found that dealing with the Sylvanar was not quite the same as dealing with a simple, sullen child. The voice of the people knew certain practical, everyday things very well, the yields of fish, the benefits of trade, the condition of every township and forest in his province. "We will have a banquet tomorrow night to celebrate this commission," said the Sylvanar at last. "Best make it tonight," replied Scotti. "We should leave for Cyrodiil with the contracts tomorrow, so I'll need a safe passage to the border. We best not waste any more time." "Agreed," said the Sylvanar, and called for his Minister of Trade to put his seal on the contracts and arrange for the feast. Scotty left the chamber and was greeted by Bast and Eurus. Their faces showed the strain of maintaining the illusion of unconcern for too many hours. As soon as they were out of sight of the guards, they begged Scotty to tell them all. When he showed them the contract, Bast began weeping with delight. "Anything about the Sylvanar that surprised you?" asked Eurus. "I hadn't expected him to be half my height." "Was he?" Eurus looked mildly surprised. "He must have shrunk since I tried to have an audience with him earlier. Maybe there is something to all that nonsense about him being affected by the plight of his people." Scene: Sylvanar, Valenwood. Date: 13 Sun's Dusk, 3rd Era, 397. The banquet at the palace of the Sylvanar was well attended by every jealous bureaucrat and trader who had attempted to contract the rebuilding of Valenwood. They looked on Decimus Scotty, Leodis Eurus, and Bast with undisguised hatred. It made Scotty very uncomfortable, but Eurus delighted in it. As the servants brought in platter after platter of roasted meats, Eurus poured himself a cup of Jagger and toasted the clerk. "I can confess it now," said Eurus. "I had grave doubts about inviting you to join me on this adventure. All the other clerks and agents of building commissions I contacted were more outwardly aggressive, but none of them made it through, let alone to the audience chamber of the Sylvanar, let alone brokered the deals on their own like you did. Come, have a cup of Jagger with me." "No, thank you," said Scotty. "I had too much of that drug in Falinesti and nearly got sucked dry by a giant tick because of it. I'll find something else to drink." Scotty wandered about the hall until he saw some diplomats drinking mugs of a steaming brown liquid poured from a large silver urn. He asked them if it was tea. "Tea made from leaves?" scoffed the first diplomat. "Not in Valenwood. This is Rotmeth." Scotty poured himself a mug and took a tentative sip. It was gamey, bitter and sugared and very salty. At first it seemed very disagreeable to his palate, but a moment later he found he had drained the mug and was pouring another. His body tingled. All the sounds in the chamber seemed oddly disjointed, but not frighteningly so. "So you're the fellow who got the Sylvanar to sign all those contracts," said the second diplomat. "That must have required some deep negotiation." "Not at all, not at all. Just a little basic understand of mercantile trading," grinned Scotty, pouring himself a third mug of Rotmeth. "The Sylvanar was very eager to involve the imperial state with the affairs of Valenwood. I was very eager to take a percentage of the commission. With all that blessed eagerness, it was merely a matter of putting quill to contract, bless you." "You have been in the employ of His Imperial Majesty very long?" asked the first diplomat. "It's a bite, or rather, a bit more complicated than that in the Imperial City. Between you and me, I don't really have a job. I used to work for Lord Atreus and his building commission, but I got sacked. And then the contracts are from Lord Vanek and his building commission, because I got 'em from this fellow Reglius, who is a competitor, but still a very fine fellow, until he was made dead by those Khajiiti." Scotty drained his fifth mug. "When I go back to the Imperial City, then the real negotiations can begin, bless you. I can go to my old employer and to Lord Vanek and say, 'Look here, you, which one of you wants these commissions?' And they'll fall over each other to take them from me. It will be bidding war for my percentage, the likes of which no one nowhere has never seen." "So you're not a representative of His Imperial Majesty the Emperor?" asked the first diplomat. "Didn't you hear what I said? You stupid." Scotty felt a surge of rage, which quickly subsided. He chuckled and poured himself a seventh mug. "The building commissions are privately owned, but they're still representatives of the Emperor. So I am a representative of the Emperor, or I will be. When I get these contracts in, it's very complicated. I can understand why you're not following me. Bless you. It's all like the poet said, a dance in fire, if you follow the illusion, that is to say, illusion." "And your colleagues, are they representatives of the Emperor?" asked the second diplomat. Scotty burst into laughter, shaking his head. The diplomats bade him their respects and went to talk to the minister. Scotty stumbled out of the palace and reeled through the strange organic avenues and boulevards of the city. It took him several hours to find his way to Prithala Hall and his room. Once there, he slept, very nearly on his bed. The next morning he woke to Juris and Bast in his room, shaking him. He felt half asleep and unable to open his eyes fully, but otherwise fine. The conversation with the diplomats floated in his mind in a haze, like an obscure childhood memory. "What in Mara's name is rotmeth?" he asked quickly. "Rancid, strongly fermented meat juices with lots of spices to kill the poisons," smiled Bast. "I should have warned you to stay with Jagger." "You must understand the meat mandate by now," laughed Juris. "These Bosmeri would rather eat each other than touch the fruit of the vine or the field." "What did I say to those diplomats?" cried Scotty, panicking. "Nothing bad, apparently," said Juris, pulling out some papers. "Your escorts are downstairs to bring you to the Imperial province. Here are your papers of safe passage. The Sylvanar seems very impatient about business proceeding forward rapidly. He promises to send you some sort of rare treasure when the contracts are fulfilled. See, he's already given me something." Juris showed off his new bejewelled earring, a beautiful, large, faceted ruby. Bast showed that he had a similar one. The two fat fellows left the room so Scotty could dress and pack. A full regiment of the Sylvanar's guards was on the street in front of the tavern. They surrounded a carriage crested with the official arms of Valenwood. Still dazed, Scotty climbed in, and the captain of the guard gave the signal. They began a quick gallop. Scotty shook himself and then peered behind. Bast and Juris were waving him goodbye. "Wait!" Scotty cried. "Aren't you coming back to the Imperial province too?" "The Sylvanar asked that we stay behind as Imperial representatives," yelled Leodis Juris, "in case there's a need for more contracts and negotiations. He's appointed us Undrape, some sort of special honor for foreigners at court. Don't worry, lots of banquets to attend. You can handle the negotiations with Vanek and Atreus yourself, and we'll keep things settled here." Juris continued to yell advice about business, but his voice became indistinct with distance. Soon it disappeared altogether as the convoy rounded the streets of Sylvanar. The jungle loomed suddenly, and then they were in it. Scotty had only gone through it by foot or along the rivers by slow-moving boats. Now it flashed all around him in profusions of greens. The horses seemed even faster moving through underbrush than on the smooth paths of the city. None of the weird sounds or dank smells of the jungle penetrated the escort. It felt to Scotty as if he were watching a play about the jungle with a background of a quickly moving scrim which offered only the merest suggestion of the place. So it went for 2 weeks. There was lots of food and water in the carriage with the clerk, so he merely ate and slept as the caravan pressed endlessly on. From time to time he'd hear the sound of blades clashing, but when he looked around, whatever had attacked the caravan had long since been left behind. At last they reached the border, where an imperial garrison was stationed. Scotty presented the soldiers who met the carriage with the papers. They asked him a barrage of questions that he answered monosyllabically, and then let him pass. It took several more days to arrive at the gates of the imperial city. The horses that had flown so fast through the jungle now slowed down in the unfamiliar territory of the wooded Colovian estates. By contrast, the cries of his province's birds and smells of his province's plant life brought Decumus Scotty alive. It was as if he had been dreaming all the past month. At the gates of the city, Scotty's carriage door was opened for him, and he stepped out on uncertain legs. Before he had a moment to say something to the escort, they had vanished, galloping back south through the forest. The first thing he did now that he was home was go to the closest tavern and have tea and fruit and bread. If he never ate meat again, he told himself, that would suit him very nicely. Negotiations with Lord Atreus and Lord Vanek proceeded immediately thereafter. It was most agreeable. Both commissions recognized how lucrative the rebuilding of Valenwood would be for their agency. Lord Vanek claimed, quite justifiably, that as the contracts had been written on forms notarized by his commission, he had the legal right to them. Lord Atreus claimed that Decimus Scotti was his agent and representative, and that he had never been released from employment. The Emperor was called to arbitrate, but he claimed to be unavailable. His adviser, the imperial battle mage Jaga Tharn, had disappeared long ago and could not be called on for his wisdom and impartial mediation. Scotti lived very comfortably off the bribes from Lord Atreus and Lord Vanek. Every week a letter would arrive from Juris or Bast asking about the status of negotiations. Gradually these letters ceased coming, and more urgent ones came from the Minister of Trade and the Sylvanar himself. The War of the Blue Divide with Somerset Isle ended with the Altmeri winning several new coastal islands from the Wood Elves. The war with Elsewhere continued, ravaging the eastern borders of Valenwood. Still, Vanek and Atreus fought over who would help. One fine morning in the early spring of the year Third Era 398, a courier arrived at Decimus Scotti's door. "Lord Vanek has won the Valenwood Commission and requests that you and the contracts come to his hall at your earliest convenience." "Has Lord Atreus decided not to challenge further?" asked Scotti. "He's been unable to, having died very suddenly just now from a terribly unfortunate accident," said the courier. Scotti had wondered how long it would be before the Dark Brotherhood was brought in for final negotiations. As he walked toward Lord Vanek's building commission, a long, severe piece of architecture on a minor but respectable plaza, he wondered if he had played the game, as he ought to have. Could Vanek be so rapacious as to offer him a lower percentage of the commission now that his chief competitor was dead? Thankfully, he discovered, Lord Vanek had already decided to pay Scotti what he had proposed during the heat of the winter negotiations. His advisers had explained to him that other, lesser building commissions might come forward unless the matter were handled quickly and fairly. "Glad we have all the legal issues done with," said Lord Vanek fondly. "Now we can get to the business of helping the poor Bosmeri and collecting the profits. It's a pity you weren't our representative for all the troubles with Bendermark and the Arnesian business, but there will be plenty more wars, I'm sure of that." Scotti and Lord Vanek sent word to the Sylvanar that at last they were prepared to honour the contracts. A few weeks later they held a banquet in honour of the profitable enterprise. Decimus Scotti was the darling of the imperial city, and no expense was spared to make it an unforgettable evening. As Scotti met the nobles and wealthy merchants who would be benefiting from his business dealings, an exotic but somehow faintly familiar smell rose in the ballroom. He traced it to its source, a thick, roasted slab of meat, so long and thick it covered several platters. The Cyrodiilic revellers were eating it ravenously, unable to find the words to express their delight at its taste and texture. "It's like nothing I've ever had before. It's like pig-fed venison. Do you see the marbling of fat and meat? It's a masterpiece." Scotti went to take a slice, but then he saw something embedded deep in the dried and rendered roast. He nearly collided with his new employer, Lord Vanek, as he stumbled back. "Where did this come from?" Scotti stammered. "From our client, the Sylvanar," beamed his lordship. "It's some kind of local delicacy they call unthrappa." Scotti vomited, and didn't stop for some time. It cast rather a temporary pall on the evening, but when Decimus Scotti was carried off to his manor house, the guests continued to dine. The unthrappa was the delight of all, even more so when Lord Vanek himself took a slice and found the first of 2 rubies buried within. How very clever of the Bosmer to invent such a dish, the Cyrodiils agreed.
I asked you to investigate why the morale has been low in the fort. Have you learned anything? What is this regarding? What are you... Hey, is that booze I smell on you? Smells like cyrodiilic brandy to me. I'd know the smell anywhere. How about giving a thirsty soldier a little pick-me-up? Some fine cyrodiilic brandy. Good stuff. Thanks, friend. Just hasn't been the same around here since this became a dry fort. It's ridiculous, I tell you. That's right. No liquor at all is allowed at Fort Frostmoth these days. Captain's orders, I guess. Seemed odd coming from him. Captain Carius seemed like a fair enough guy as long as we carried out our duties. Guess he figured we weren't up to his standards, so he cut us off. Since then, everyone's been in a pretty foul mood. I thought he was a pretty good guy until this whole alcohol ban. Just seems kind of spiteful to me. You're in Fort Frostmoth, Jewel of the Empire. Get out while... Got enough for now. Check with me later, though. Watch yourself at Thirsk. Nothing but a bunch of drunken barbarians, I tell you. I have heard it is a place populated by the Nords native to this island. It lies somewhere to the northeast. I think he's got an office in the Imperial Cult Shrine. Don't know much about the man, but I understand he's got something to do with the new colony on the island. Yes,
what is it you want? I heard you might be able to get hold of some booze. Yeah, I love it, and you don't seem to have any more that I'd even drink. I hate this place. Uphold the law of the Empire. Praise the glory of the Emperor. Follow the orders of your superior. Got nothing else to say about that right now. Why don't you talk to the captain?
What is it you want? I heard you might be... Yeah, I love it. And you don't seem to have any more that I'd even drink. Got nothing else to say about... Hello, citizen.
What? What is it you want? I heard you might be able to get hold of... Yeah, I love it. And you don't seem to have any more that I'd... Got nothing else to say about that right now. He's recently arrived from Cyrodiil. You'll likely find him inspecting the grounds at Ebonheart. Yes? What can I do for you? He's got an office upstairs here in the Imperial Cult Shrine. Don't know much of... Yes, I know it has. These soldiers lead a difficult existence on this island. It's cold, wet, dangerous, and far from home. The men here are denied all luxuries. This place is just damned awful.
I can't imagine eating one of those things. If you need shrine services, just ask, but be quick. I have an important cult matter on my mind right now. Yes, you see, my protege Marissa left the shrine over a month ago for those forsaken frozen wastes. Her challenge was to bring the word of the Imperial cult to the local savages. She hasn't returned, and I fear the worst. What else would you call them? They're hardly civilized with all that bear and wolf worship, and they hardly even recognize the 9 divines. Most Nords are too busy worshipping heathen gods like Alduin and Orkay. That's why Marissa's missionary work was so important. Marissa has a passion for preaching. She thought she could be most effective by spreading the tenets of the imperial cult to the residents of Solstheim. It's dangerous but necessary work. Her journeys into the wild have been very successful in the past, but Marissa never returned from her last outing. I fear something terrible has happened to her. I don't suppose you would be willing to look for Marissa. She means a great deal to me. That is, her work is very important to the imperial cult. You have the look of an adventurer about you. If you could find Marissa and return her to me, I would gladly empty the shrine's coffers into your purse. She left here over a month ago and headed north toward Lake Fjelding. You should begin your search in that area. It's a big lake toward the northeast. Of course, it's covered by ice, so it's not of much use. I have heard it is a place popular.
Keep moving. What is it? What do you want? Is this about the East Empire Company? I'm a very important man, I'll have you know, and I have no time for anything other than business. Yes, that's right. I'm the local factor. Not that it means much at this point. Our operations are just getting underway, and frankly, we're short-handed. We could use some help. Do you wish to join the East Empire Company? Your interest is commendable, and we can certainly use the manual labor, if nothing else. As with all business, make sure you understand the requirements before agreeing to anything. So, are you willing? The East Empire Company is a business at heart. Applicants should have a winning personality and a strong will. Those with the ability to speak eloquently and barter shrewdly are most valuable. Given the hostile environments the company often ventures into, applicants should have a keen sense of security. Finally, all applicants should be trained in the time-honored virtues of long blades and medium armor, as has been customary for the company for generations. Very well, then. You are now in next peak rank in the East Empire Company. I'll make it clear to you now that I am the one in charge. See me when you're ready for an assignment or want a promotion. You've got the qualifications, but you haven't done enough to prove to me you're ready. Complete another assignment or two and then we'll talk. You think you're ready for work, eh? Very well. The first of our workers have arrived and need to get to the mining site. None of them are particularly skilled with a blade, so I'd like you to escort them. They know the way. You simply have to make sure they arrive safely. Once you're there, check in with Falco Galenus. He'll give you further instructions. For now, go speak to Gidar Verothan. He's down by the dock. He's the second in command and takes his orders directly from me. Thankfully, he spends almost all his time at the site, so I don't have to listen to his optimistic drivel all the time. You can find him there. What is this regarding?
So good to see you. So, you're the escort? Well, fine. Let me know when you're ready to go. Gammon, Sabinus, and I need to get to the site so we can start work. Can we leave, or do you need more time? All right, then. We all voted and decided that you get to take the lead. None of us are particularly fond of the woods. I'm not saying we're cowards, mind you, and we felt that you'd be better off leading the way. I can at least mark the spot on your map, so you know which way to head. Lead on.
Die! See what you're made of. Not for me. Die! Pointless! Give in!